Welcome to the informational webinar for the Learning Through Languages, or LTL, High School Research Symposium. This broadcast is on Monday, September 23rd for 1 hour starting at 4 p.m. Today's agenda and presenters are coming up on the screen. My name is Anne-Marie Gunter. I'm the World Languages Consultant at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. I'm going to do your welcome today and make sure everyone has good access to their control panel and how they're going to use it. And then we're going to have Emma Harver, the Outreach Coordinator at the Duke-UNC Consortium for Middle East Studies, as well as Allison Haskins, the Outreach Coordinator for the UNC Center for European Studies, share with us about the Learning Through Languages competition. As you can see on the screen, there are several parts to that they want to talk with you about today, and we also have handouts and links to share with you throughout this broadcast. We'll end by answering any remaining questions before we go today, and that's our agenda. To get started, we also like to know what your goals are for today's webinar. So I'm going to run a poll question. That's simply an audience response system within GoToWebinar, and ask you the question, what are your goals with today's webinar? Are you a teacher getting information for a student team application for LTL? Are you a teacher or administrator gathering details about this competition? Are you an educator earning a contact hour for licensure renewal? Are you an individual curious about the LTL competition? Or do you just want to remain anonymous on a Monday afternoon? I'm going to go ahead and set the poll, and you can click on your answers. You can check all that apply on this poll so that you can tell us what your goals are with today's webinar. All right, thank you for participating in the poll. I'm going to go ahead and close that and then share the responses with you. As you can see, the large majority of you, 75%, are a teacher or administrator gathering details about this competition, just to learn a little bit more. 25% of you are teachers actually getting information for a student team application, so that's great. Over half of you are an educator earning a contact hour for licensure, and that's good too. Please know that this is a 1 hour webinar, so you'll earn 1 contact hour or 0.1 CEUs. You'll get that information in an email receipt after this broadcast, and it also includes a certificate. Please note also that your district or charter school may have to approve professional development offerings like this for them to count towards licensure renewal. All of that information is in the certificate though. Also, we have a little over 10% each of people who say they're just individuals curious about this competition or who want to remain anonymous on a Monday afternoon. We certainly understand that too. I'm glad to have everyone here. And I will turn it over to Emma and Allison.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for that wonderful welcome and for sharing all of those details. And thank you to DPI for collaborating with us on this webinar about learning through languages. My name is Emma Harver, and as Anne-Marie mentioned, I am the Outreach Coordinator for the Duke-UNC Consortium for Middle East Studies.
And my name is Allison Haskins, and I am the Outreach Coordinator for UNC's Center for European Studies.
And we should note that even though we represent these two centers, this program for high school students is a collaboration of many global centers, both at UNC Chapel Hill and Duke University. And we'd like to just point those out for you here. The African Studies Center, the Carolina Asia Center, the Center for European Studies, the Center for Slavic, Eurasian, and East European Studies, the Duke-UNC Consortium for Middle East Studies, and the UNC Duke Consortium in Latin American and Caribbean Studies. All of us collaborate to put on this program annually. We are so excited that this is going to actually be the 5th anniversary of the symposium. The program has grown every year with different changes, and so each year we do this informational webinar to update new teachers who might be interested in joining, as well as returning teachers, about changes and updates to the program. Let's see if I can advance. Great. So as I mentioned, this webinar is applicable not only to folks who have participated in learning through languages in the past, but those who are interested in participating this year and in future years. So we would love to know who's joining us today and ask you this poll question: if you have ever participated in a previous Learning Through Languages high school research symposium. So maybe you've participated once, maybe for multiple years, maybe you've not yet participated, or maybe you've participated in another capacity. So if you could take a minute and answer that poll question. And I'll let Anne-Marie monitor on your responses when it seems like a fair number of folks have responded about their past participation.
Everyone's responded. Go ahead and close the poll and share the responses.
Great. So yay for the person who has participated for multiple years, and we are excited about the 90% of you who have not yet participated in Learning Through Languages. We hope that we can answer your questions today. Feel free again to chime in the chat box, and we will be covering the kind of general overview of the program, guidelines, and where to find more information, and we'll hope to have you and your students join us. Okay, so we are going to go ahead. I wanted to share the website for the program. This is a great place to go if you have unanswered questions, or if you would like to see some of the frequently asked questions. A lot of the documents you'll find on this website we've actually also added as handouts. So in your control panel, you should see 5 different handouts, and you might be interested in going ahead and downloading those. I know you'll have access to these after the webinar, and you can also find them off of this website. The symposium will take place on December 5th, and you can see information about the application deadline, the notification of acceptance, and you'll be able to see an application link there as well. So it's oh, great, thanks for putting that in the chat box, areastudies.unc.edu/LTL. It's a great resource for you to have and share with your colleagues who might also be interested. So we'd love to just kind of begin with this general overview. What is Learning Through Languages? Learning Through Languages is an opportunity for North Carolina high school students to showcase their language, research, and presentation skills in a scholarly environment. This program that I mentioned is in its 5th year, and it promotes student learning in the areas of research methodology, technology literacy, critical thinking, and encourages the learning of new academic vocabulary as students research different world topics. You can see that through this program, these are kind of the objectives, that students will learn about different topics related to world regions, learn in a team, in a group, so participate in cooperative learning. They will produce informational writing aimed at an academic audience, so they're getting great academic writing skills. They will also use public speaking and presentation skills in the target language, and they'll receive feedback from UNC and Duke judges about their language learning. So who's eligible to participate in Learning Through Languages? So the program is open to high school students only. It is open to students who study Arabic, Chinese, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Russian, or Spanish, including heritage speakers. These students, we encourage that they are at level 3 or higher, so that they are able to, they have enough skills and grammar, vocabulary, so that they're able to write a research paper in the target language. Students will form teams, so students don't participate individually, they must participate on a team. Those teams can be made up of 2 to 3 students, and each teacher may bring up to 3 teams. We are at a capacity of 36. We might be able to accept 42 this year. We always try to grow the program, but we are limited on the number of teams that we are able to accept into the program, and so we do have that team limit there, but we do encourage you to conduct this project with your entire class. We've seen teachers who do mock symposia with their students, all of their students, before they come to UNC for the symposium. That's a really great way to involve your entire class. Maybe some students are eager to present to UNC and Duke judges, and for some students maybe they'd prefer to present to their peers or to you. So we encourage you to use this, the program guidelines and the rubric in the classes you teach as well. Your students will choose to research a topic related to 6 different world regions, and you'll see these different regional focuses correspond with the centers that sponsor this program. So your students will either research a topic in Africa or related to Africa, Asia, Europe, Latin America, the Middle East and North Africa region, or Russia and East Europe. Now, we mentioned that your students should be at level 3 or higher. We recognize that you might have some really, really high achieving students that you think would love to participate. We welcome you to submit applications for those teams. To ensure that students are judged accurately on their language ability, when you apply, you'll click that they are in the intermediate proficiency or advanced proficiency categories. All right, so we have another poll. We would love to know what language you teach. So if you teach in the group of Asian languages, that's Arabic, Chinese, or Japanese, Romance languages, French, Italian, Spanish, or Germanic or Slavic languages, German and Russian, or other. And we should note that we've grouped these, and this way those links are live. They correspond with the way that UNC Chapel Hill has grouped languages into their departments. So you'll see the links here are to the various departments on campus. So if you can share, and what language group do you teach? We would love to know who is joining us today.
And just so you know, before we start this poll, these slides, including these with these hyperlinks here that you see on the screen, will be available to you approximately 1 week after our broadcast, so that you can use them. And they may be available earlier, just to let you know. Please go ahead and respond to the question. And what language group do you teach? All right, you're very fast at voting, so I'm going to go ahead and close our poll. 100% have their votes in. And Emma, before we move from this slide, after we talk about results, I do see one question or two in the question box.
Okay. All right, that's great. So Romance languages, 55% of you teaching Romance languages, 27% in the Department of Asian Languages, 9% Germanic or Slavic, and 9% other. That is pretty representational of the way the symposium kind of looks every year. The students who participate in the symposium annually are pretty representational proportionally for student enrollment in world language programs in North Carolina. So we tend to have more Spanish and French teams and fewer students in less commonly taught languages. But we think it's really exciting for students who might be in districts where there's not a lot of language variety being taught, for them to see their peers studying these other languages so that they might be inspired to one day study those languages. And Anne-Marie, I cannot see questions.
Oh, no worries. I can just tell you what the questions are. The question we have right now is, do the students on the teams have to be taking the language course currently? So for example, students who took maybe Japanese 3 in the spring of 2019, are they also eligible to be on a team?
They are eligible to be on a team. The students don't have to be currently enrolled in a world language course. We recognize that different schools and districts have different calendars and schedules and courses taught at different times. And so as long as that student is organized on a team with other students from their school and that they have a sponsoring teacher, that they would be eligible to participate. So the sponsoring teacher also does not have to be a world language teacher. It could be, we encourage world language teachers to bring students But school administrators, librarians, teachers from other disciplines are all eligible to be a sponsoring teacher. If the sponsoring teacher is not a world languages teacher, we encourage them to maybe partner with a world languages teacher to make sure that the students are getting the resources they need. That sponsoring teacher should accompany the students to the symposium, help assist with their research, answer questions they have, provide resources, and generally be a cheerleader for the student team throughout the process. Thank you for that question. All right, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Allison, who's going to talk a little bit more about what the symposium looks like.
Okay, great. So for the symposium, the duties of the student is threefold. They'll have to make a paper. So they'll have to create this 2 to 3 page informative research paper on a topic related to the track of their choice. So they will have a language that they're designated and a language that they're producing their project in, but then they'll also choose a regional track to study, which we'll go over a little bit more when I get into the research project. They'll also create, second, a project visual to present to the judges, and they'll have it set up kind of science fair style in our atrium. So they'll have this visual to accompany their research paper. And then the third thing they'll do is present their research to the judges in their target language at the symposium. So the judges will go around, there'll be a couple rounds of judging, and they'll ask the students questions about their project. The student will talk about their project, and it'll give them a chance to practice presenting on their research in that language. It's also great, a bonus of the symposium is that they get to network with our wonderful UNC and Duke faculty, other high school language learners around them, and the wonderful staff and students that are here learning languages on campus. So for the research project, the students of whatever language they're choosing to present in, they may choose to compete in any regional track. So we have these 6 regional tracks. We have Africa, we have Asia, we have Western Europe, Latin America and the Caribbean, Middle East and North Africa, Russia and Eastern Europe. The research should stay contemporary in focus, basically meaning that it should stay 20th and 21st century. Anything after 1901 would be fine. And then the students decide themselves on a research question, and they must use both primary and secondary sources as supporting evidence. And just to go a little bit more in depth, the informative essay that we're asking for, as laid out in Common Core standards, is the type of writing that explains a certain issue or topic. They should maintain an objective, neutral tone throughout this essay and throughout their research.
And we are attempting to advance to the next slide.
Just a quick update while you're working on that. I'm sure everyone's aware, but just a reminder, the North Carolina Standard Course of Study no longer includes the Common Core standards. We have just revised, particularly our English Language Arts standards and, of course, our mathematics standards, so that they are North Carolina-based standards for our North Carolina Standard Course of Study.
That is a great point, Anne-Marie, and I should note that if you download the LTL Program Guidelines 2019, you will see in the part 2, the research project that we're going over now, you will see those new relevant writing standards from the English Language Arts Standard Course of Study for North Carolina. They're still kind of linked to Common Core, but certainly the language is a little bit different. So you'll be able to see what relevant standards this project relates to in those program guidelines.
Great, yeah. So moving on to the suggested research topics. So as I mentioned before, the students, it's up to them to choose what they want to do their research on. We provide a list of suggested research topics, which is also one of the handouts you see there. But these are just some good examples of what they could write on. For example, with Africa, why is South Sudan in conflict? Discuss causes and effects. A discussion of causes and effects is a good topic to go with certain things. Talking about the Hong Kong protests, gender equality in Scandinavian countries, Diego Rivera and Frida Kahlo influencing art in Latin America, talking about the refugee camp in Jordan and life in the camp, and lastly, what are the causes and effects of the rise of populist and nationalist politics in Eastern Europe, So all of these are just examples. You don't have to present on one of them. They're just they're there to help guide the student groups in choosing their topic.
And again, just to emphasize Allison's point, these students are neither given favor nor are they penalized for choosing these research topics. They really are just to get their minds flowing and thinking about, oops, went too far, thinking about what they would be interested in studying.
Yeah, exactly. And then for the research project, as we mentioned before, the written paper needs to be 2 to 3 pages, and it has to have a minimum of 5 sources. They have to use at least one primary source document. That primary source document can be in any language, but at least 2 of the 5 sources, whether they're primary or secondary, need to be in the target language that those students are presenting in. And then the page and character requirements does change a little bit depending on the language. You can find that deeper in one of the handouts we have posted. The project visual, there's a lot of creative freedom the students could do with the project. We'll have a few pictures coming up in a few slides, but it should contain imagery and language, and it should demonstrate creativity and innovation in some way. A lot of students do a poster board or a display board, PowerPoint, a short video model. We should note that we can't provide technical assistance on the day of, so if the students want to do something involving electronics, they have to plan for that themselves. And lastly, for the oral presentation, there's a few guidelines we have laid out for that. Each student must speak for at least 60 seconds, and they're allowed to refer to a note card if they'd like. And then after the oral presentation, they'll have a 5-minute Q&A with the judges that are talking with them. So that will happen a few times as the judges rotate through.
Mm-hmm. So there are 3 rounds of judging throughout the symposium. Your students will interact with 3 different judges, and their final score will be an average of those 3 judges' scores. But it gives them the chance to interact with multiple people on both campuses. It gives them the chance to practice kind of more than once. So if their first time presenting, they feel really nervous, hopefully the second time they feel a little bit more confident, and the third time even more confident. So it's nice that they have the chance, if they are really nervous for the first round, they don't feel like they've completely blown it. They get the chance to interact with more judges throughout the day, which is great. Each round is 15 minutes. As Allison mentioned, the first 5 minutes is the student's presentation. The next 5 minutes is Q&A with the judges. And then the final 5 minutes is just additional time for the students and judge to continue conversation in the target language. They may or may not use all of that time. The judge may politely excuse themselves to go finish their scoring, or the students might have questions about what it's like to learn X language at the collegiate level. That time is for them to, again, network with the judges. We should also note for the written paper regarding the formatting, each written paper, regardless of the language, will have a title page, which will include the name of the research project, of course, the students' names, the sponsoring teacher's name, the world language course, and school. We also ask that they have an abstract page, which will outline the research question and give a very concise summary of the important points of the paper. And this abstract really helps prepare them for university writing. That's commonly asked of in various courses on different college campuses. And then the meat of the paper really is the main body, which does have a page limit, or for Chinese and Japanese, a character limit. And again, those guidelines are in our program guidelines document. And finally, the paper should have a references section. And this will include citations in APA style, which is in accordance with the various topics, kind of these more social sciencey topics that the students will be researching. And the references can be in English. This is the only part of the project that can be in English, because citations are confusing for us all. Mm-hmm. So the references can be in English or in the target language. We leave that decision up to you and your students. Regardless, the students will need to know which sources are primary and which are secondary because of those written paper requirements. This is for the judges. So they'll just write a little note next to their reference, primary, parentheses, or secondary. If you have questions about APA style, we have linked a really great resource from the OWL lab at Purdue University in the program guidelines so that you feel comfortable helping your students answering questions about APA formatting. This might be the first time that they are working with APA formatting, but it will probably not be their last. So it's a great chance for them to get more experience with a different kind of formatting. You'll also see here on this photo an example of one of the project visuals. This team decided to do a 3D model. And you can see they have note cards with text there. So as you were hearing those different sample topics that Allison shared, we're just curious to know what global topics that you think your students might be interested in researching. Is there something you know that's really on your students' minds, or something maybe that you all just discussed in class that you think they would be really interested in exploring further in a more in-depth research paper? Again, we are not offended if they're not in any of the topics that we have put forth. Again, those are just simply for brainstorming. And of course, it's fine too if you do not have any idea of what your students might be interested in researching. That's part of the beauty of this project, is that the language that they study doesn't necessarily need to correspond, and we encourage actually for them to get out of their world region, typically associated with the language of study, as a way to kind of encourage this cross-regional thinking and help them to explore different perspectives on global issues that they might not have otherwise had. So we invite you to type your answer in this poll about which topics you think might resonate with your students, what you think they might be interested in. If Anne-Marie, if you could start that poll. Oh, I'm sorry, it's in the question box.
And I do have the question box wide open, looking for responses to this question. What contemporary global topics do you think your students will be interested in researching? We saw several examples, so I'll look for those. This is also a good time while we're paused to download the handouts from the handout space on your control panel if you're interested in doing that. All right, Bonnie has noted one topic that she thinks her students would be interested in is the U.S.-China trade war.
Very relevant, definitely.
Jeff has said he thinks the Olympic Games and their societal influence might be an interesting topic that his students would like.
Interesting.
The Olympic Games, and I'm sorry, which influence?
Just the societal influence or impact that the Olympic Games have.
Absolutely. And if your students do choose something of that nature, they will need to focus it on a world region. Again, you'll notice that so much of this program is tied in with these world regions, and the reason for that, again, is for the centers putting them on. All of our centers have received funding from the Department of Education that helps promote our world region study. And so we're really excited for students to kind of dig deeper into one of these regions. So certainly the impact of the Olympic Games in, whichever country hosted last, or for a particular country's team, would be a great research topic.
Okay. Mara said she thinks her students will be interested in something related to government.
Great. Again, as long as, they are picking a world region, and the beauty is they could pick any of the 6 to study. So digging deep into one country's government would be a great research project.
Andrea said that she thinks her students will be interested in a topic like social justice or perhaps immigration.
Both of those topics have been very popular. We love seeing students research different organizations around the world affecting social change. Those are always really exciting to see. We've seen a lot on climate change, and also immigration is continuing to be an important global issue. So that's another great one as well.
Emily has said she thinks her students will be interested in agriculture because they live in a farming community and they love the big agriculture show in Paris last spring.
Oh, cool.
That's great. Yeah, making that global learning relevant for their students, all these topics. That's great.
And we have one person who said they just found the LTL Symposium information yesterday and were able to join us today. And so they don't even know yet what their students might be interested in.
And that's also great. And again, you can look at those suggested research topics just as a starting point if that could help your students brainstorm. Sometimes we know that when students see suggested topics, their minds get stuck on them. And so whatever you feel is best to help support their creativity, we support you in that. All right, well, thank you for your responses. It's always fun hearing what your students might be interested in studying, and of course, it's okay if they change their minds. On the application to the symposium, they will need to, you will need to put what topic or theme they are interested in. So here you will see a handful of photos from past symposia just to kind of help give you an overview or at least a visual to associate with the symposium. So on these top photos up top, you will see two groups of students of Chinese. Both groups studied different impacts of the refugee crisis in Europe. So you can see one group they both have, many of these teams have trifold boards. That is a popular project visual, but students have no limit in their creativity other than kind of the space that they're given. You'll see that the students are on half tables. So they are presenting near each other. We encourage students to use their inside voices, and judges stand pretty intimately. You can see this judge on the top left who is up close and asking questions, a pointed question about the project visual. So the students and judges are easily able to hear each other, and it honestly kind of sounds like a cafe environment where everyone is speaking all of these different languages. It's very, very awesome. On the bottom, you will see a Spanish team that studied police brutality in Brazil. And on the bottom right, you'll see a French team that was studying the impacts of the Arab Spring on human rights in Tunisia. And you'll see that team did choose to bring a laptop to accompany their trifold. As Allison mentioned, your project visual will need language, so text to incorporate the language of study as well as something visual. We do these various components of the research project, both written, oral, and visual, to acknowledge and celebrate different kinds of learners. We all learn in different ways, and our students have different strengths, and we want to give each student the chance to shine according to his or her strengths. And so hopefully one of these pieces of the project is something that your students can really connect to and get excited about. So you'll see here on this next slide is, I think, another good overview, literally a bird's eye view of the symposium. It does take place in the FedEx Global Education Center at UNC Chapel Hill. You can see there are multiple stories. I think this year we might have students on both stories, but you can see kind of the beautiful organized chaos of the day where students are huddled around their projects and having an intimate conversation with the judge in that target language. And again, I should say, I think the cafe vibe is present, where there is noise, but it is not overwhelming. You'll also see I don't know if you can see in these display cases down here, our building has a global exhibit every semester, and so your students will also get to see the global art on display. So as we mentioned, for the symposium, there are the 3 rounds of judging. We do provide lunch for all of the students, all of the teachers, and all of the judges. There are chances for students to present to and network with each other in kind of a student presentation round, and that is the other part of the symposium that does happen in English, because we want students to give the chance to present and engage with their peers. We think that's really important. People who have attended the symposium have traveled from Charlotte, from Eastern North Carolina. We really seek to represent the various districts across the state in the program, and so we encourage all districts to participate. So it gives students the chance to interact with different people from around the state. There's also a global hour And this Global Hour is a showcase. We do this in our auditorium. It is a showcase of global happenings on campus. That Global Hour is meant to be engaging, but also informative. The students can learn about the different student groups engaged in different global studies on campus. In the past, we've had dance groups who study Bollywood dance or who are doing Irish dance perform. We've had short videos about different parts of the world. We've had students share about their backgrounds from other parts of the world. So it's a great chance for your students to engage with UNC students and learn about the different kinds of global happenings on campus. And then finally, there's a closing ceremony and adjournment. Oh, and really finally, there's an optional tour of campus. So if your students have never been to Chapel Hill, we want to give them the chance to engage beyond our building, which we are biased and think is very beautiful, as you can see from this photo. But we want to be able to connect them with the rest of campus. And so we do organize an optional tour. Again, that is purely optional, but we like to just provide that as an option for your students.
Okay, great. Now I'll talk about the judging of the projects and the awards and how we go about doing that. So background on the judges. The judges are UNC and Duke faculty, their instructional staff, and their graduate students. They all have a very high proficiency or native proficiency in the language, and they're very qualified to ask these questions and to grade these students on language skills. This year we are switching our scoring a little bit over. Previously we did scoring in more of a competitive way where certain teams would beat other teams and more of like a horizontal competition. This year we'd like to switch it up and make it more of a vertical competition, judged in ways that maybe the students are familiar with if they're in marching band or choir, judged in a certain way where the teams are awarded a rating of 1 through 5, 1 being the highest rating, 5 being the lowest, and this is based on an average of the 3 judges' scores. So they'll still be judged the same way they would be before. They'll still get a score, but at the end of the day, they'll be able to, there could be multiple superiors, as you see listed on the slide. There could be multiple excellents. One team won't necessarily beat another team out. So we think this will be a great way for the students to get really accurate feedback, for the students to really try and push themselves to do a good project, but so that because one or another team beats another, to kind of avoid that happening a little bit. And also with languages, as long as you're speaking, we all think here that, it's awesome and everyone's a winner when you're speaking a language. So we want to make sure it's reflected with language learning as well, that the scoring is equitable. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the tone of the symposium very much aims to be celebratory. We recognize that your students will probably be nervous. Speaking in another language can be difficult. It can be scary. They're, in a new environment, speaking with professors, but we do really want them to feel accomplished and celebrated, and that they are achieving, and that learning languages is important, and that it helps open doors, and that it inspires them to continue their language learning in whatever capacity beyond high school that might be. And so, as Allison mentioned, in the past we kind of had best overall project, best overall visual, and we've learned that it is very difficult to judge across these language categories because these languages have different difficulty and proficiency. And so again, hopefully this new scoring system will encourage students to strive to do the best they can, and again will provide the opportunity for more accurate feedback. We are also introducing this year an aspect of the scoring sheets where judges, if they do write notes, will be able to tear those off and give those to you. You will also eventually get their scores, but it takes a couple of weeks for us to tabulate those. So usually after your students come back from winter break in January, we'll be able to give you the full score. And so the scoring rubric, which you can also download, the LTL judging rubric and scoring sheet in your handout section. The scoring rubric, just as I mentioned with the project itself, recognizes not only language ability, but also overall research methodology and creativity. We really, again, want to celebrate different kinds of learners. And we're excited with this new scoring system where students will really be able to feel valued and hopefully accomplished. So as you're thinking about applying for your students, and we'll talk about the application process in a minute and why it is an application, we wanted to provide a handful of resources for interested teachers. You can see more about the languages across the curriculum programs, both at UNC and Duke. This is one of the inspirations for this project. These movements intend to make global competence a reality for students, and doing that by moving beyond just language, grammatical, vocabulary study, but really focusing on different content courses. You can again also see this APA style guide, information about good research questions and topics from Duke University, and then resources for oral communication in the classroom. We should also note this program is free. It is free for you and your students. We recognize that while the program itself may be free, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's free for a teacher to participate. So we do also have some school support funds available, i.e. substitute reimbursements and mileage. So on your application form, you will just note whether or not you'd like to be considered for school support funding, but we want to make it as feasible and as easy as possible for you to bring your students to UNC Chapel Hill and engage in this program. Another resource that's not listed on this slide for participating teachers, we will do another webinar, not about the logistics and details of the program, but this webinar will be done by a professor in the UNC Charlotte School of Education, Kristen Davin. And this webinar will just provide tips, best practices for coaching your students through this research project, and maybe new pedagogical practices to you about how to prepare them for this oral presentation. And so it will be another resource. We're really excited to involve the UNC Charlotte School of Education in this program. So lastly, how to apply. Before we move on to any final questions that you might have, we did want to, again, the application is live at this link that Anne-Marie had put in the chat box. We did need to move to an application process simply because of the volume of interest across the state, which is so inspiring. And again, we are so excited to have students interested, and we encourage you to conduct this project with all of your students. In the application, it is pretty simple. It shouldn't take you more than 5 minutes per team. You will fill out an application for each student team who applies. So maybe you have 2 groups of 3 really interested students. You would submit 2 applications, 1 for each group. In that application, we'll ask you information about yourself, your contact information, your school. We'll ask you information about the students. Their information will be protected. It's kind of their name, what language class they're in, what language they study. And then we'll ask you these kind of meatier questions: which topic the student would like to research, why the team wants to participate in learning through languages, and then how participation in this program will benefit your students. So do think about those questions. That's something that the review team that looks at and considers. So make sure you have those conversations with your students about why they really want to participate in this extracurricular commitment. The application deadline is in a couple weeks on October 10th. Our team reviews applications, and you will receive a notification of acceptance by October 15th. And the LTL Symposium is December 5th. The papers are due in advance. The research, the project visual, and the oral presentation, of course, happen the day of the symposium, but the research paper is due on Friday, November 22nd at 5 p.m. That date is in the program guidelines, so no need to write that down at the moment. But so your students will have over a month, well over a month, to complete this research project. And so that should be plenty of time for them to think about a topic and to really get into the details of writing their project. So this is our final poll question before we open it up to any other questions you might have. But after hearing more about what Learning Through Languages is, the objectives of the program, what happens, what the students create, we would love to know what you think would be the most beneficial aspect to your students for participating in the symposium. Maybe it's using oral and written skills in a practical and content-based project. It could be you think they would benefit from engaging in global studies and learning about the world, again, maybe beyond the world region that they typically study in the language course. Maybe it's participating in cooperative learning, so on their team of 2 to 3 students. It could be using their creativity and 21st century skills, like using online research to create a project visual. Or it could be coming to campus and meeting UNC and Duke faculty, staff, and language instructors. Or unfortunately, we don't have an other button, but if there is an other that you see as a great benefit of this program, we encourage you to write it in the chat box or the questions box. So Anne-Marie, if you could start that poll.
Yes, and remember, you're picking out the most beneficial aspect. You may see all of these aspects as beneficial, but you want to focus on the most beneficial at the moment.
And we see all of these as benefits of the program, and so hopefully you agree. Again, if you have other ideas, feel free to write them in the comments box. And I know it might be hard to single out one of these, especially if you haven't seen your students go through this process yet, but we hope, thinking forward about what they might gain from participation in a program like this.
And it looks like we're almost finished voting, so people can get their last decisions in. And a question has come up too about the scoring or judging process, so I'll share that in just a moment. All right, that looks like votes are in. Go ahead and close that and share the results for you to discuss.
Great. So it looks like half of you think the most beneficial aspect would be using oral and written skills in a project. Great. Absolutely. And then maybe 20% in both cooperative learning, but also learning about the world, engaging in global studies, and 10% in working or coming to UNC and engaging with faculty and staff. That's great. We are excited to host this program every year, and again, every year it looks a little different. We're always making changes based on feedback, and it's exciting to think about what your students might accomplish and learn from this kind of program.
All right.
Great.
The question is, will a student or a student team be evaluated differently if they're in a Spanish 3 class versus a Spanish 4 class versus something like an AP course?
That's a great question. So we do ask, again, that you indicate on the application whether or not they are in what you see as intermediate or advanced proficiency for your language. The judges are asked to consider the ACTFL guidelines for your student's language level. So essentially, yes, your judges should be should be judging the students based on their proficiency. They're not expecting every student to be at level 7. They will take your student's particular level into consideration, and that is also noted on the judging rubric and scoring sheet to take the individual proficiency of the team into consideration when judging.
All right. We did have a question earlier that is very relevant for this slide you have up. Someone wanted to know if the two of you are professors at UNC or Duke, and I said, no, I believe you're outreach coordinators. I don't think you're professors, but you may want to talk a little bit about your role, particularly as it pertains to K-12 programs, and maybe what your UNC Global Centers do across the state.
That's a great question. So neither of us are professors on campus. We are staff, Area Studies Center staff in the FedEx Global Education Center. I've been in my position for almost 5 years, and Allison has recently joined us this past year. And both of our roles are to connect people off campus with our on-campus resources and to provide ways for people to engage with global studies. So we both run outreach programs specifically to K through 12 and community college schools for both students and teachers. So we do a little bit of programming for students, directly for students, like learning through languages, but the largest part of our efforts are actually devoted to professional development for teachers. And so all of these centers that you've seen on these slides offer professional development in a variety of forms. Could be one-day workshops, we do webinars, we do longer-term teacher fellows programs. Some of our centers do study visits to our world regions, so study tours abroad. We also do localized study tours in which we study our world region here in North Carolina, learning about the world, but also making it really relevant to our North Carolina students. And so those are some of the kinds of things that we do in our roles as outreach coordinators. Is there anything you want to add, Allison?
Just to echo everything Emma said, we kind of do this day in and day out and work a lot with teachers, and we're very passionate about it, and we're really excited to put on something like Learning Through Languages for both the teachers and the students.
And I should note, for those that might live around here or come to this area, all of our programs also do public events. That's another part of what we do. We coordinate many public events on a wide variety of topics, from pretty niche academic topics to really about current events, really pressing issues. And they're open to the public. We welcome all of you and your students to join us for these events. This past week, we hosted the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, which was a really exciting event. We had some local area high schoolers joining us for that program. So those are some of the resources that we offer. All of our centers have listservs for K through 12 teachers. You might have heard about this program from the DPI World Languages listserv, or maybe from Anne Marie, or maybe from one of our listservs. But if you're interested in learning more about programs related specifically to one of our world regions, I encourage you to email myself or Allison. And if you're really interested in Latin America and our Latin America outreach coordinator is not here, we can always connect you with her, and that way you can stay in touch with us and hear from us on a regular basis through our listservs with different resources and opportunities.
And Allison and Emma are correct. We do share a lot of things from the UNC Global Centers on the listservs, particularly when it pertains to K-12 teachers and their students. So, for example, we are sharing this webinar. We're partnering together, of course, but also coming up, the Carolina Asia Center, which is also part of the UNC Global Centers, I believe. They're offering a teacher workshop, and so that's been advertised on our listservs as well, just so we can get the word out to as many people as possible. But like she said, you're also welcome to sign up for their listservs directly. We just try to make sure that information gets duplicated in several different places, so we have the best opportunity of making everyone aware.
Are there any final questions? I know it's almost 5 o'clock.
So we have a couple things. First of all, Bonnie wanted to give a shout out to Emma. She says she's taken her students to the LTL competition 2 years in a row, and Emma and her team did a great job in organizing such a big event every year for the students.
Oh, thank you, Bonnie. That's much appreciated.
And Emily noted that Emma's emails on the listserv and emails in general are the best. Lots of information there. And we do have a person who said they'd kind of like to know about how many teams applied last year to the competition and how many were accepted.
That is a good question. If my memory serves me correctly, we had between 60 and 70 teams apply, which I know sounds like a lot, but we are able to accept. We accepted 36 last year, and we're hopeful that we will accept 42 this year. Part of the challenge, as you can imagine, is wrangling our judges. Our judges are volunteering their time to be with your students for essentially half of a day, and so we need to be able to find enough people with the right language skills and disposition to work with your students. And so we are unfortunately limited, but I would say at least a 50% acceptance rate, if not higher. Are there any other questions?
I don't see any at this time. If you go to the next slide, I can show everyone where this information will be posted after our broadcast.
Great. And if you do have other questions, oops.
Go ahead.
I think I did that. sorry, Anne-Marie. If you do have any other questions that you think of later, our emails are on this webinar, so feel free to shoot us an email afterwards. Okay. There.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if I'm controlling it or if Anne-Marie is controlling it. Great.
I think we can both control it. So there we go.
Team effort.
Couple of things. There is Emma's and Allison's contact information, like they said, their emails, and of course the website that has all of the details we've heard about today. One question here in the box says, how long does it take to get accepted once you apply for your student teams?
Yeah, so we don't review the applications until the deadline, which is October 10th. And you will hear about your team's acceptance by October 15th. So it's a 5-day turnaround time. We give ourselves a week to thoroughly read and assess all of the applications before we get back to you.
All right, and as I noted, we will post this information from our broadcast today, including an archive of this recording and the slides with all the links and everything, as well as links to the handouts on our NCDPI World Languages website. You see there the main page as well as the bit.ly link for it, bit.ly/NCDPIWL. And also I want to let you know, I'll put this on the webinar series information page since it is one of our sort of our world language webinar series, and that's where all that information will be so that you can go to it.
All right, well, thank you so much, Anne-Marie, for hosting this informational webinar. We hope that this was useful to you, interested teachers who have not participated before. Again, if you have additional questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. There is a video on our website, areastudies.unc.edu/LTL. It's a short 3 to 4 minute YouTube video with footage from the symposium. So if your students need to see it for themselves, or you want them to see it to get excited or generate interest, that's another resource for you that you can share with your students. It has footage of the students, of the judges, and then it has a pretty basic overview. I am guiltily featured in that video, so shameless plug for the video. We hope that it's a useful tool for your students to kind of see the program in action.
All right, great. Well, big thank you to everyone for joining us today. We know it's probably the end of a long day, a long Monday, but school is well underway now, and so we hope you're settled into a good routine, and we'll think very seriously about submitting a student team application or 2 or 3 to get your students involved in this. This is really a good opportunity for them to expand their skills a little bit in the target language and try something new, perhaps.